Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Film Audit, podcast where us four college friends just talk about movies that we've currently watched and, just keeping up to date. My name's Jared.
I'm TK.
I'm David.
I'm Spencer.
And today we're just going to be talking about a few different movies that we've watched in the past couple weeks. We have some recommended movie, some current things that we've watched, but we're just going to start off the podcast talking about what have you guys seen recently?
Well, the big thing is we all watched the Batman last week. Finally got around to that.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, we took about, how many would you say there were of us? Like at least 8 to 10 of us?
I think it was 10.
Yeah, 10 people. We all took the best seats on a night watching the Batman. Like middle of the theater, a little bit higher. It's perfect.
Yeah, it was really good. As someone that's not really like a super big Batman fan, I've seen like the Dark Knight trilogy and Tim Burton's Batman, but that's about the extent of it. But like when I watched Robert Pattinson's Batman, there was something about it that was like, it didn't seem like Batman, but it was new and it was different, but I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I really liked this take on Batman.
Yeah, I feel like personally as a kid, I really enjoyed, like the POW or the BAMs, whatever you want to call it. It's very colorful. As an adult, I can appreciate the actual tone of who Batman really is and that he actually lives in a darker city. So the fact that they set the tone with not only Christopher Nolan, but also with Matt Reeves' version of Batman, it blew my mind away, that they could do it again. Especially after a trilogy of The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
It's still entertaining to watch.
Somehow it managed not to be just like a tired retread of everything that we've seen before.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to say that I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect this movie to be bad, but as we talked about in a couple episodes ago, I wasn't getting on the hype train just because I didn't want to get my hopes up for something that was just another entry into an existing IP and genre that we've seen a bunch of times before. So I kind of just gave myself no expectations for the film, and I really enjoyed it. And I agree. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I kind of went in with the same expectations because I've been let down by DC before, but they did not disappoint this time, and I really like this Batman, and it's going to be probably one of my favorites.
I think I've heard this a lot, but a lot of the big influences for this movie, I would directly compare it to like Zodiac and Seven, both David Fincher films. And I would definitely give those a recommend to anybody that liked the Batman to try out both of those. It definitely took its style and tone from both of those in different ways. So it's very grounded, very detective noir in its approach to the Riddler. Felt very much like the Zodiac Killer, who was a real killer, but the movie is based off the Zodiac Killer. But both those movies are great, so I would definitely watch those if you like the Batman.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And given the runtime of it all, like there were some spots that I feel like I wouldn't mind getting out to go to the bathroom or something, but like majority of it, I was thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah, that's another nice thing is that it's nearly 3 hours long, but it really does not feel that length.
Right.
Mm.
I remember thinking at one point that perhaps the story was starting to wind down, and I didn't want it to. Unfortunately, it wasn't even close to the end, but I just couldn't tell because I wasn't looking at my watch. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how long things had been going. But the pacing is really good. I especially love the first half or so. That's the half of the movie that focuses the most on the detective angle. And Batman is very much just a detective going to crime scenes, looking at clues, talking with Alfred about his discovery, talking with Gordon, and going to a bunch of different locations, talking to different people, interrogating them. And so that the first half really feels like very noir influence. The second half, not as much, but it's still really good, obviously.
Yeah, I think my only gripe, with the movie would be just kind of the ending. It just felt like it could have ended 3 different times, but then it kept going. I don't know why it felt that way, but I feel like it wasn't really necessary. They could have, I don't know, wrapped things up a little bit better.
Do we want to get into spoilers?
I think so.
Okay.
Spoilers
for the Batman.
One of the ones for me is I only noticed one of them. I know exactly what you're talking about. We have the moment where he gives a monologue about being hope for the city. You think it's getting right there. And then we get our moment with Zoe Kravitz, Catwoman, and then you think it might end right there.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get the Joker scene. I think the only thing I felt was like, I felt like it should have ended after the Catwoman's ending where they say bye. And then I felt like the Joker thing was just such a filler, weird thing to leave on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was the Catwoman thing was necessary. I think that we needed that. It didn't feel like 1, 2, 3. It just felt like, oh, Catwoman was needed, and then why do we have this Joker scene? They tested this movie with 2 different endings where they end it after after Batman says bye to Catwoman, and then one where they added the one that we saw in theaters where they add the Joker scene. And I feel like they decided on that because people like Joker and because they like that feeling of, oh, hey, here's an after credit scene. Like, of course, like people that are tailored and conditioned to be in the Marvel audience to stay after credits and watch what's going to be the next thing. I think that was the main reason we ever got a Joker scene.
Yeah. But yeah, because I feel like that Joker scene was really what added to that feeling of, oh, this movie just won't end. Because it feels like an after credit scene that was just shoved into the middle of like an already like perfectly fine ending.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, oh, it's over because now we're watching the post-credit scene, but then the movie keeps going afterwards. And it really felt very studio mandated to me.
Yeah.
Especially since, researching the movie and hearing what Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves have to say about like their plans for sequels, it doesn't even look like they're like planning on using the Joker. So it really is just a cameo.
Yeah. And it makes like, so in the movie there is an after credit moment where it flashes a code on the screen and that's all you get. And if you follow that code, it brings you to a website where you can solve some riddles. And all the riddles said, because I didn't take the time to do it myself, but the riddle just says like, oh, you thought things were over, but like, oh, I'm not done, basically. And that's a lot less like powerful and creative when you just throw in a Joker scene with Riddler where it's like, you did good, ha 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 ha. And then you're like,
everyone loves a comeback story.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we get it, you'll be back. And then you have this like very fitting Riddler end. Like it made it just, okay, that doesn't even really matter. But if it wasn't in the movie, the scene with Joker, that last little after credit code thing would have been a lot cooler for everyone.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, we get it.
I think speaking of the Riddler, one of the things that a lot of people are talking about the movie, and rightfully so, is Paul Dano's performance. I really like this version of the Riddler. A lot of people are complaining that he's not accurate to his origins. I couldn't care less about that. So I think the fact that we got this like grounded Zodiac Killer-esque Riddler was really cool. He works really well for the world of Gotham that this movie creates. That it's just dark and seedy and gross. Because Riddler, obviously the fact that he's a serial killer is disturbing, but you also get the sense that he's just like this slimy guy. Like after he does the first kill of the mayor, is it the mayor?
Yeah.
And he's like straddling his back. It just feels so dirty.
Yeah.
And then he pulls out the duct tape, and at that point you don't know what he's gonna do with it. But I just thought that Paul Dano did such a good job of being this gross guy. He plays gross people very well. Prisoners, he's really creepy in that. I'm trying to think of what else now.
There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, There Will Be Blood. He's pretty like scummy. So I thought he did a really good job. There were parts, especially in the interrogation scene with him and Batman, where I felt like he kind of pushed his performance a little bit too far, and I stopped believing in the character, and I started noticing that it was like Paul Dano giving a wild performance. It didn't take away from the movie too much. I still thought that the character was really good and that the performance was good. But I feel like he could have been reined back a little bit more to fit in with like the serial killer persona that he was trying to give off.
Yeah. I also really liked his character, and I think I mentioned this in one of our past videos when we were talking about the Batman trailer, but I think the Riddler is a really good foil to Batman, and even more so in the movie that, like, we didn't get context in the trailer. Because, like, the whole thing is that the Riddler is basically what's the word I'm looking for? The Riddler is a product of Gotham and its corruptness and the people that come from it. And Batman is equally the same thing, kind of, but kind of like the same coin, different side, you know?
Right. Yeah, they comment on that a few times. I mean, the fact that the Riddler in the first place thinks that he's working with Batman to do all these things.
Yeah.
He's delusional, but he recognizes at least that, the same circumstances that created him also created Batman. And while Batman wouldn't want to admit this, they both have similar goals in trying to root out the corruption in Gotham.
Mm-hmm. And even like the same like upbringing, other than wealth, that's the main difference. But like they both were orphans around the same age, and it just happened to be that the Riddler's character was put through the system of being an orphan, but in Gotham through the Wayne Orphan Foundation. And so it's just I like that direct reflection of both characters, and not only Batman and Riddler, but like whatever Riddler's name is and Bruce Wayne.
Right. Yeah, and then at the end, after Batman's beat up the other, like the Riddler acolytes, I don't know what you want to call them.
Yeah.
But he beats up the last one, and they take off his mask, and they ask who he is. And the Riddler goon says, "I'm Vengeance," which is what Batman's been saying the whole time. And it kind of dawns on Batman that, maybe my personification of vengeance isn't actually doing the city any good. Because he also remarks at the beginning in the opening narration that it's been 2 years since he's been Batman, but crime has only gone up. And now he's saying that people that are supposedly taking on the same cause as him, vengeance, are, turning into serial killing monsters. And so that's kind of when he resolves to become more of a symbol of hope and save people and not just beat up criminals. So I feel like it was kind of thrown in at the end. I don't really get the sense that the movie was building to that revelation, but I think the revelation still works anyway because of how it portrayed the characters, and it gives him a nice character arc and resolution at the end.
Yeah. Overall, great movie. Anybody else got anything to say about that?
I mean, I thought I've got a lot more to say.
We could make this whole episode if we wanted to.
I heard an interesting conversation in one of my classes, because of course, like being at college, you'll hear a lot of buzz with this kind of movie coming out, being a superhero movie. And in one of my classes the other day, my professor starts class and says like, "Oh, has anyone seen the Batman movie? I haven't seen it yet." And so you get about 35 students in the class, like a bunch of different thrown out opinions. It was just interesting to hear some people that were like, "Oh, yeah, I saw it. It's really, really good." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." And then other people would be like, "Oh, I saw it. It's not good. You won't like it, probably. It's not like a superhero movie." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And I was trying to voice my opinion of like, it's very much detective movie, but I think you like it, all this stuff. And a kid behind me asked me, and he says, "Oh, does the movie have jokes?" And I was like, I just looked back and I was like, no. I mean, maybe there's a few, but no, I would not say this movie has jokes.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, well, I won't watch it then."
What the heck?
And I thought he was joking, and I was like, "Oh, yeah?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm definitely not watching if there's no jokes. I'm a comedy guy. So if a movie doesn't have jokes, I'm not going to watch it. I just can't sit through anything that's not a comedy."
What the heck?
And I was just like, I was in awe that kind of, consumer exists, but that it was really eye-opening experience to hear a whole class say, "Oh, this is really good," or "Oh, this isn't really good," to a movie that I thought was pretty good, and have some people be like, "Oh, it's really, really long. I didn't like it because it's long."
Yeah.
Or probably be like, "Oh," one of the main things I've heard over and over is people being like, "Oh, I'm not watching it," or "I didn't like it because it's dark." And not like dimly lit dark, because yes, this movie is on the darker side in terms of lighting, but not hard to see. But everyone's talking about the tone of the movie, saying like, oh, it was super dark and I can't watch it. It's like, sorry, it didn't have a bunch of Marvel joke quips with side characters and a CGI monster at the end. But like, there's more to movies, and I know it's a superhero movie, but there's more to movies than the formula, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because one of the things that I like about this movie is that it did a really good job of, like the Dark Knight trilogy, inserting moments of levity and kind of humor, but it's all organic to the characters.
Yeah.
Like, it's a line that somebody remarks in the moment that someone would say in real life. And it doesn't, like, break the tension of the scenes, which is kind of what the Marvel formula is. It's have something really heavy happen and then make a joke so that way you don't feel the gravity of the situation. Yeah. But this doesn't do that at all, and I thought it was really good for it. But it also didn't come off as like self-serious or like, you know, I didn't feel like it was trying so hard to be dark and depressing or anything. Because you can go at the extreme too. I'm in the I have the unpopular opinion of not thinking that Logan is that great. We can go into that later sometime, but I feel like Logan kind of falls into that where it's just trying so hard to not be funny and to be dark and edgy that it just kind of loses some of its humanity. But I felt like the Batman balances that tone like pretty perfectly.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about like the audience we watched it with?
I think that kind of just plays into what we're talking about. We've kind of been Marvel conditioned as consumers, and I definitely saw that while watching this movie. Being in a college town where we a lot of people here eat up the Disney Marvel type of stuff, but we watched this movie, and a lot of the people sitting around me were just. It felt like they were vying for any moment or opportunity in the movie to be able to make a joke and to laugh out loud and to clap out loud and to just whoop and holler. And it was really jarring to have that happen because Batman's a very un-Marvel movie. It's a superhero movie, but it takes itself seriously and it wants you to take itself seriously. But as an audience member that thinks, oh, I'm watching a superhero movie, Marvel, right? And so any moment that might have come across as funny. So like there's a scene where the Batman uses his wingsuit and he gets about 30 seconds of flight time and then crashes awfully. And it is kind of funny because he crashes and falls into a bunch of stuff. But I could feel the people around me, not the people we watched it with, but other members just like trying to make a joke and some of them making jokes to their friends and people turning and be like, oh, like when this happens, ha ha ha. And it's like, stop.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember that part, and people were just like busting out laughing so loud. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not that funny.
Exactly.
And it just ruins the whole tone. I
think it's just kind of muscle memory, and it makes people uncomfortable that they can't do that.
Yeah.
So they're trying to force it to happen in a movie, which is just, it makes it more reality that like, I don't know. I'm hating on Marvel, it sounds like. I love what it's done for me growing up and all the movies that have come out. I love everything that Marvel's done, but with their conditioning of an audience that is always searching for something funny or an after-credit scene or their character to be shown in the way that they want it to be shown and for their voice to matter very much in terms of the direction a next movie will go or the decisions of a whole company, especially within Marvel trying to decide where to go next right now. I think when we watch other movies, we just can't do it as audience members. It's kind of bad.
Well, yeah, because Marvel has that linked, like when you think of superheroes nowadays, you're thinking of Marvel. So the fact that we're going and watching a superhero movie for like DC, we still have that Marvel feeling or attitude towards it. So I understand what you're saying.
Right. And it doesn't help that DC as like a company or as a franchise in the past has tried to replicate a lot of what Marvel's doing.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they did reshoots for Suicide Squad, the first one, to make it funny and have jokes. It's like, okay, everyone's trying to follow Marvel, so when a movie breaks away deliberately from that quippy way of screenwriting, people don't really know how to react. And I think it comes down to a lot of also just film literacy. Like if you understand like the language of filmmaking and storytelling, you would know that Batman hitting a bridge in a truck and falling down after jumping off of a building isn't funny because of the way that it's shot and the way that it's like scored and the acting. Everything on the screen is telling you that it isn't funny. But if all you're used to is seeing like, oh, someone falls down, me laugh, like, then yeah, you're more likely to just be like, oh, well, someone fell, so therefore this must be played for laughs.
Yeah.
When, you know, everything on the screen is telling you otherwise.
Yeah. And I think this is a very, like, niche specific problem because we watched a superhero movie that isn't Marvel. And so this was just a very, very hyper focused observation into what can happen
Right.
with things like Marvel. Because obviously this won't happen with every movie, but in a bigger picture, I think it does affect how we view every movie and whether or not we find it entertaining, you know.
Yeah.
If it's not following up what we are always seeing as consumers within like a Marvel formula and perspective.
Yeah. One of the other things that I really liked about this movie, going back to some positives, I really like the way that it's shot and like the color grading and the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, Jared, that yeah, this movie is dimly lit, but I also like how it is at least still lit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not underlit. The film isn't too dark that you can't see anything. The DP is Greg Fraser, who did Dune and Rogue One. And in Dune, he uses a lot of kind of low lighting stuff too, especially like in the desert at night, like with the sandworm, you get some like really dark shots. And in this, he continues that, but I feel like coupled with like the set and costume design, the cinematography and the lighting really help make Gotham feel like a unique place. Because I love the Dark Knight trilogy and I like the way that Gotham is portrayed, but it's very realistic, and it's very much, at least after Batman Begins has a little bit more of the gothic feel to it. But the Dark Knight Rises feel like they take place in
Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago or Detroit.
And it works.
And it works. And it works for the tone of those movies.
Yeah.
But for this movie that's going for a lot more of a dark, almost fantastical feel in its gothic elements, I think that everything works together really well to make it feel like a place that you've never visited before.
Yeah.
Everything is so like in shambles and all the buildings are so dilapidated, and Wayne Manor doesn't look like a mansion that anyone would really live in.
Yeah,
it really looks like some like old Gothic manor. And when you like see the bedroom or the front room, it just feels like a vampire's living there. And I guess that, you know, there are some parallels between Batman and you know, vampirism. They're both bat people that like are loners and usually live in the dark and alone.
Yeah, I think its approach really sold me in every way. Like you said, the set, and I think they really borrowed from the Arkham games. If anyone's played those, it feels very, very like a fictional place, but it feels real. Yeah, everything's just so dirty and dark. I really like. We haven't talked about it yet, but Commissioner Gordon, I feel like he was casted great in the way they portray his character. Yes, I love how he feels like a Gordon that has no other option in this awful crime-ridden place, that he has to turn to this weirdo vigilante guy that like has anger issue problems, but it's the only guy that can help him. And so it feels very much like his last resort all the time.
I really appreciate like there's a line where he says like, "You're the only one I trust." Like out of like all the police in the department, like he believes that everybody's corrupt, and he's not wrong. And so Batman is like, he's a legit like crazy person in a bat suit, and he's like, "You're the only one I trust."
Yeah, it feels like Gordon's just helpless, and it fits the world. And then we get this Batman that feels completely different from any of the Batman we've seen yet. A year two Batman that has anger issue problems, isn't actually really helping the city at all. He's just doing it for his own self-fulfillment, and spends the daytime not even being Bruce Wayne, but hiding in this little bat cave, staring at a computer like a nerd. And then I love that the first time he comes out in the sunlight, you go into this Gothic manor where you see Alfred, and he offers him some fruit, and then the sunlight makes Bruce Wayne have to put sunglasses on. And it's just like, gosh, this is such a like, not wimpy, but like, just, I don't know.
Like pathetic?
Yeah, like a pathetic Bruce, like Batman, but he's but he just hides in the
Yeah.
dark, and that all of his life is spent just fighting for no reason.
Right. Yeah, and you see that in the movie has a lot of Batman and very little Bruce Wayne. And you get the idea that, like, Bruce doesn't want to abandon... He's not eager to get out of the suit and relive his life as Bruce Wayne. Like, he really... It's kind of a typical element of most Batman stories. You know, the idea of, you know, what's the real mask? Is it the Batman mask or is it the Bruce Wayne? That's the mask. That's not new, but the fact that he spends so much time in the bat suit really illustrates that, yeah, his mask is when he becomes Bruce Wayne, and his real identity is when he's Batman.
Mm-hmm.
This angry guy beating up people.
Like, Batman is the only thing, I think, that gives him purpose in life, at least at this moment in his life. Because there was this great scene where he's not in his bat suit, and he's walking around Gotham as Bruce Wayne, and he goes to talk to Falcone. And he goes over to like this strip club that he's been to multiple times as Batman, and just like beats the crap out of like the security guards. But like when he's there as Bruce Wayne, he's like his shoulders are slumped, he's looking down, and he's like almost like he feels so naked and exposed as Bruce Wayne, and you can feel that like he hates being there as Bruce Wayne and not Batman. And it's like a huge contrast to like how he feels as Bruce Wayne as opposed to Batman. Whereas he's Batman, he's confident, he's brave, he can take on the world. But as Bruce Wayne, he like can't even talk to people that he's beat up before.
Yeah, this Batman very much feels like he's never interacted with anybody in his life. It feels like an orphan that has never had a social setting to thrive in. And so like you get moments where he's Batman talking to Catwoman through a computer because she's doing detective work for him, and he says something like, "Oh, I think I broke that guy's nose," and it just feels awkward, and like he can't actually say anything funny to her, and she's like, "Okay,"
Yeah.
and like I feel it through his performance in the Batsuit because you spend all of his time with him in a suit, and you can only see half of his face, but throughout it just feels like he's this awkward yet strong guy.
I guess one of the other things that I didn't like a whole lot, apart from the Joker scene that we talked about earlier, is that I didn't love how some of the third act went down. I feel like the whole first like 2/3 of the movie or more, I feel really grounded. And even though it's got, you know, people dressed up as bats fighting other people in wonderfully shot action scenes, which we haven't talked about, it's, I don't know. It feels more like a detective movie than a superhero movie. And the action is very sparse throughout the film, and it usually doesn't last very long, and it's brutal and quick. And then at the end, after the Riddler's been captured, all of his like online buddies that were like, I guess on his like 4chan, like they all get together in Riddler costumes, and they're about to like shoot the candidate for mayor, and he just like has to beat up a bunch of goons on top of like the catwalk in this like stadium. And like for a while, for me it just kind of feels like it's devolved into like the typical superhero. I don't want to say schlock is a little harsh, but yeah, the typical superhero fight where he's got to fight off a bunch of guys, and he's like dangling off of the catwalk and like on this neon sign. And there's this one part that especially feels just like kind of dumb. So he's like dangling off the edge of the catwalk, and like the last like Riddler henchman comes up to him, and like really, this is all happening really slowly. And at first I think that the camera's lingering on him because it's going to reveal that he actually was the Riddler, that he broke out or something. But like this goon like comes up to Batman really slowly, and he like reloads his gun. And he puts it up to the Batman's face, like, really slowly. And obviously everyone else was, like, trying to kill him as quickly as possible. But this one's taking its time now. And at the very last second, Catwoman jumps down and pulls the bad guy away and beats him up. And it just felt so, like, contrived and cliche. Yeah. And so that compounded with the fact that he's already, like, fighting a bunch of goons and that felt a little silly to me. That when Catwoman comes down really took me out for a second. I don't know if it did the same thing for you guys.
I completely agree. The whole movie takes itself seriously until we get to that moment in the third act of, oh, don't forget, this is a superhero movie. And so it does what you said, this big fight that has to happen. But in my opinion, if we would have left the last fight scene to have been a few scenes earlier where Batman's infiltrating Falcone's lair and he fights a few guys in the dark with automatic weapons and we see like flashes of him fighting. If that was the last one, I would have been completely fine because the movie sells you on there's not going to be a lot of these. And I didn't really need another one, and the last one felt forced. And so I think the only good part out of that last little fight sequence was getting the character arc of him saving people. Yeah. I feel like they could have still done that without needing this a bunch of Riddler henchmen fight. You know, it felt very forced. And so that was, out of everything in the movie, I think that is what took me out the most. It was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And contrived Catwoman entering at the last second. I'm like, okay, we get it.
And of course, the goon that she beats up isn't actually like incapacitated. So while she and Batman are talking, he gets back up and he starts like attacking Catwoman. And then Batman's got to like force himself up and beat him up, and it's just like, okay, oh gosh, what are we doing here? Like Jared said, the fact that this is a comic book movie kind of rears its ugly head for a brief second at the end, and you're like, no, go away. I like the detective stuff better, but fortunately, it doesn't ruin the whole thing. The third act is still, like, for the most part, really good.
It redeems itself some with the saving people and the really good ending monologue.
Yeah,
and then the whole Catwoman goodbye.
I just felt like almost every single shot in that movie was like a work of art. Like you can make it into like a painting or something. It was really, really beautiful. But at that last scene, it did feel like a superhero movie. It's like, okay, what happened to all the amazing shots and cinematography? And it just looks like an Avengers movie or whatever.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah. For a brief moment, it stops being pretty looking, but then it goes back. Like, I liked when he falls in the water, and you see, like, a splash of the red and blue for a second as he's in the water from above, and then when he's taking the people across the water, and you see a shot from above, I thought that was really pretty.
Yeah.
But, yeah, overall, I really liked it. I'd give it, like a really solid 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
You?
Probably 9 out of 10.
Probably give it 8 out of 10. Solid.
Go 8.5, 9.
Yeah. This is definitely a lot of people saying it's like, of course, you see it on TikTok, and I've heard people on campus be like, "It's the best movie ever." I'm like, no, don't say that to people. But it is really good.
Yeah.
Or in my opinion, I still think The Dark Knight is a league ahead, just in a lot of ways. But this is still probably, out of all Batman movies I've seen, the second best.
Yeah.
And that's still saying a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I think that's all the time we'll take for movies that we've watched. We took a good chunk of time. So we're going to transition over to our recommended movie this week. And David recommended Birdman.
Yeah, so it had been about 2 years since I had watched Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. I remember loving it the first time I watched it. I wrote a glowing review about it. And then I just didn't ever get around to watching it again. And it had been long enough that I remembered like most of what happened. I remembered the themes. But it wasn't as fresh in my memory, so I wanted to take this opportunity to rewatch it myself and then get your opinions out of it. I know that Jared had seen it before, but Spencer and TK hadn't. And something that I talked to Spencer a little bit the other day when I was loaning him the DVD to watch it was kind of the approach that I wanted him to take while watching it. And it's kind of like the best approach that I think anyone could take to watching Birdman. And that is that the movie, at least to me, is not so much about like the story or the plot. And it's not as much about like the characters, though I'll get to that. I really think that this is a movie that focuses on some core themes, and that everything that happens in the film, whether that be with the characters, the characterization of the characters themselves, the play that the characters are performing on stage, all of this works together to deliver a cohesive message and thematic ideas. And those are the things that I latch on to most with this movie. In addition to the filmmaking prowess that it exudes, I think this is a really theme-forward film. So the movie stars Michael Keaton, and it's directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu. He's a Mexican filmmaker. He also did like The Revenant, Amores Perros, a few other things. And Michael Keaton stars as a guy named Regan Thompson, and he is a washed-up actor who is known for playing the superhero Birdman in 4 movies, the last one having come out in 1992. And since then, he really hasn't had a career. He's not taken seriously. And he's decided he attempts to adapt a book into a Broadway play to kind of get his career back and restore his image. And so the film follows him as he's trying to hire cast members and get the production going. You see 2 or 3 preview performances that they do. And then the film ends with the opening night performance, and then things happen after that. So it's a pretty loose movie in terms of structure. The storyline doesn't hit most conventional beats because it really is just focusing more on the characters and the themes that it's trying to get across. What do you guys think of the film?
So, like, the very first thing that I noticed about this movie is that it was all, well, for the majority of it, just one take.
Yes.
And I really, really like that. And obviously it was like not really all one take. It was probably edited together, but it was just really cool to just not cut away from anything. And it just makes you feel like you're there. And I think it also, since there's no cut, there's no break, it feels like you can feel the exhaustion of the character Regan, and he just does not get a break. He is always working on this, and I really liked that choice that they made.
You seemed pretty excited when he said...
Oh, yeah. Pretty much, Spencer already said all I really wanted to say. Really, I really appreciate how certain transitions are made, but the fact that it is one take for majority of the film, I was just appalled by it, really. Wait, that's a good thing, right, Paul?
No.
Yeah, that's bad.
Okay, I was... What was the word I'm looking for?
In awe?
In awe, there you go. I was definitely in awe. And I want to say, when it cuts to like day or night to day, I think those transitions are amazing. Because like, it's just a still shot, I guess you could say.
And it's like a fake time lapse where you see like the sun come up.
But not only that, but like even at the beginning of the movie, you see Michael Keaton in his dressing room or just whatever. It's broad daylight, okay, and then you're just stuck with him and everyone else in the cast, the crew, everything. And by the end, he goes outside. It's nighttime, and it feels like you've worked a whole day with him. Just kind of like what Spencer was saying. Just a different take that I had on it. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think the thing that I appreciate most about this movie is the technical aspect of how they were able to achieve this, and it really makes you feel like you're watching moments. You're just watching like people actually trying to make a play, and you're just given these moments that you get to view as they talk and as they try to work through things, and it feels like you're walking around a stage production building, and you're just spending time with all these different people with their different conversations. It's just a really immersive experience, and I really like how they transition a lot of the time. I think there's one of the ones that I really liked was you get a moment with Edward Norton and Emma Stone's characters where they start to have sex, and it cuts away from them, and the camera moves over, and they're on this catwalk, and the camera, you can hear talking in the background as if people are rehearsing, and the camera continues to go over the catwalk and down and you see that we're on another preview night, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's Edward Norton. For a second, I thought it was like they're rehearsing. Then you see it's like, oh no, this is a transition into preview night.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's just so cool.
Yeah, and apparently the decision to make the film like appear like a single shot came from Alejandro's realization that he said, we live our lives with no editing. And by presenting the film as a continuous shot, he could submerge the protagonist in an inescapable reality and take the audience with him. And that's what you guys are exactly saying, is that it feels like you're with these characters and you're walking around with them. You're just kind of trailing behind. And yeah, he can't escape. This doesn't end. He can't just like stop living this, especially with like all these deadlines. With the technical aspect of the filmmaking, the blocking and staging that are required to get all of this to happen, and like the camera is constantly moving and you can't just cut. It's incredible. And I noticed that there are lots of times where like mirrors are able to keep actors in the frame. So you're always seeing everyone who's on stage, who's, in the shot, even though the camera is like staying in one place for a moment. And then the one take trick helps the film feel like improvised, as does like the score, because it's just this percussive drum set score that just feels totally off the cuff. But it's crazy because it contrasts with the fact that that this movie was not improvised at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was looking into it, and the script had to be so polished, because normally when you're shooting a film, you can have, you write the film, and then when you shoot it, you can kind of change stuff. And then when you edit it, you can be like, I don't like this scene, or this scene actually should go before this other scene. You can't do that if you're trying to simulate a one take. Mm-hmm. You can't just cut out a scene or put a scene earlier than this other scene. Yeah, so that they worked on the script for so long to make sure that everything was exactly how they were going to want it. And even then, this film feels improvised. It feels like the actors are just like talking to each other. And I love the way that it's able to accomplish that. And the one take thing is just kind of, adds to that feeling of improvisation.
Well, I think that's the beauty of it too, because when you feel like they're doing improvisations in their lines or what they're doing, then it makes it even look more natural. So therefore you get lost in the film and you forget that they're actors, and that's one thing that I appreciated a lot in this film.
And I think something just so smart about the movie is the performances throughout this. And so you get, I don't want to say the main character's name wrong. Is it Regan or Regan? Regan, okay.
It sounds like Regan, though.
Regan and Edward Norton's character both give such a good performance, but Michael Keaton's is a little bit more subtle because he has to play this. Michael Keaton plays a character that is an actor that is not that great, and you can see it in Michael Keaton's acting performance. Yeah. It's like when he's being Regan and just doing his best to get this play going, you can't tell. Like, it's an amazing performance. But then when he's actually acting on stage, you can feel the subtleties of like, that's not that good,
Right.
And it's just like, wow, that's awesome that they're able to like differentiate that, but not make it so obvious of like, yes, I am a bad actor. It's just like little inconsistencies that make you realize, you forget that Michael Keaton is acting as two different characters in the movie. And then especially you get a contrast with Edward Norton doing so well, being like this jerk all the time. And it's just so fitting to him in real life, apparently. I really like how they play off of each other the first scene together, where he's like, no, just set down the script, feed me lines. And you're like, oh wow, Edward Norton, he's annoying and it's awful, but he's a better actor than Regan is, and he's trying to learn from him. Both of their performances really sell you on this just natural setting where you're watching people trying to act and to get this production happening. I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton is amazing.
So, with the director, I can't say his name.
Alejandro?
Did he want to cast Michael Keaton alone?
So, I was looking into that a little bit. From what I remember, he wasn't the initial... It wasn't like they wrote the film with him in mind, but as they were developing the film, and then Alejandro thought of Michael Keaton, he realized, okay, I need to get Michael Keaton. He isn't just. I think the line was like, he isn't just a choice or an option. He's the one. Like, we need to get him. So eventually they did pick him. The role wasn't written for him though. But
I see, because it fits him as Michael Keaton, because everyone knows him as Batman.
Right. Yeah, and I like how the film is able to kind of poke fun at that. Like the fact that supposedly the last Birdman movie came out in 1982, which is the release date for Batman Returns. Mm-hmm. I guess kind of the difference is that Michael Keaton isn't... I don't think anyone would really consider Michael Keaton to be washed up. That's a little, too far. And then Michael Keaton himself said that Riggin is the character least like himself that he's ever played. Like, obviously, like, the facts around Riggin and, like, his history line up with some of the stuff with Keaton. But, like, personality-wise, Keaton said that they're, like, diametrically opposed. Going back to the improvisation thing a little bit, if I can. Something that I think is also cool is that improvisation isn't just an aspect of the filmmaking. It's also kind of interwoven into the film through the dialogue and the storyline. So when you're talking about Mike, played by Edward Norton, and he's just like having him feed him lines, and he kind of ignores the script and he just says, "I'll think of something, I'll riff." Like he's having to improvise there. After he gets locked off stage outside, Riggin has to improvise. His entrance is coming up, but he's stuck outside in his underwear, so he's got to just, in the moment, on the spot, has to come in and, he points a finger gun at them, pretending it's a real gun, and has to walk up the stage, and that's, he has to improvise all of that. And then obviously the one-take aspects, and then the drum score. So there's kind of this ongoing theme of, like, you have to improvise, that permeates, like, the whole film.
I think I read or saw this somewhere, but that scene where he walks out in public in his underwear, that actually had real people. Like, that was legit. That was not staged at all.
Okay, I wouldn't say at all. So they shot it after midnight so that there would be as few people outside as possible. And then most of the people that are, like, interacting with him or, like, right next to him, those are all actors. Right. But, like, people in the background and stuff, like, that's all, those are all real people because, like, you can't, like, block off, like, Times Square and, like, not let people walk around. So most of the people that you see on screen are actors, but
because, like,
it's still, like, a real thing that happened.
Right.
Yeah. Like, a lot of the people there were, like, saying, "Oh, it's Birdman." It's like, people wouldn't be saying that.
Right.
You suck.
Yeah, exactly.
Sign the autograph. Come on, don't be mean.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'd feel, though. Like, if you were an actor and you didn't like it, like, all right, go walk out in your underwear in public right there. Well, don't worry, we'll have people there. Majority will be ours, but people will see you in your underwear. Like,
yeah.
I guess that kind of reminds me of just, like, acknowledging the kind of stuff that's happening outside of him and, like, in the real world. I like the fact that Riggin is... in his head has, like, Birdman talking to him in this, like, fake Christian Bale Batman voice.
Yeah.
And at one point, he actually, like, shows up on screen. You see Birdman, like, following Michael Keaton around. He starts flying, and he directs, he talks to the audience, he's breaking the fourth wall. But I like the fact that there are, like, these funny nods to the fact that everything with Birdman is just happening in Riggin's head. So there's this part where Riggin is, like, trashing his apartment, but he's using, like, these, like, superpowers by, like, telekinetically, like, moving stuff around the apartment, and then the camera pans over to the door. The character played by Zach Galifianakis shows up, and then it pans back, and you see Riggin with his hands, like, trashing the place.
Yeah.
Or, like, later,
when he
Riggin,
flies.
Riggin decides that he's gonna fly around, so he's flying all around, and then he finally gets back to the theater house, and he, like, walks in the door, and then you see this taxi cab driver, like, "Hey, this guy didn't pay me." And, like, you see him, like, walk into the theater. The camera's just lingering on the door, and then, like, a couple seconds later, he comes out with money in his hand. So you know that, okay, Riggin wasn't flying. He took a cab, but in his mind, that's what was happening. And so there are a bunch of, like, nods to the fact that, it's all happening in his head.
Yeah.
what confuses me, though, with that aspect of having Birdman as, like, another personality in his head, he's seeing things, the ending.
Right. Spoilers for Birdman.
Do you want to talk about that right now?
I mean, yeah. What do you guys think? Because again, reading about it, the filmmakers refused to comment on, like,
how cool,
on the ending.
So they just wanted it for interpretation.
Yeah. But so, what is your interpretation? I guess
I couldn't really have a solid interpretation because, like, obviously, from what we've witnessed, where he actually takes a taxi cab instead of flying back to the theater, and he's standing on a window ledge up from his hospital room, which I'm assuming is like a couple stories up. A couple stories up. I would just assume that he fell. But then you see his daughter, who's played by Emma Stone, come up to the window looking for her father, and she sees the windows open. She looks out, looks down, but there's like no shock to her face, right? Then she looks up and is smiling, and I'm like, does that mean that he was actually flying, or is she at peace with him? You know, like, I didn't understand that. So I just wanted your guys' thoughts and opinions on it, because I could not dissect that.
Okay. I guess I'll go first then. So the way I think about it is that, like, it's still all in his head. Like, I do think that he jumped, but after he jumps, he is probably imagining that he's like flying away or something. And so when he imagines his daughter, he's not going to imagine her looking down in shock. He's going to imagine her looking up, seeing him fly away. I still think it's in his head, even though he is hypothetically dead in this situation. If that makes sense.
Yeah. At least for me, it didn't matter to me if it was real or if he did jump or if he died. It's just the idea of that, like, this world, this idea he has in his head of being this star, and that everyone still cares about him, and like, look, I can fly and I have these powers. It was just fitting for me that when he jumps out, his daughter is also looking up and seeing him fly, and like someone else is able to recognize what's always been in his head. And so, like, yeah, I don't know if he died, you know, but it's just kind of a cool moment for me of like, what a man, what word I'm looking for, like, what a very full of himself man, you know?
Yeah. I think I'm kind of in the same camp as Jared. I don't necessarily care what happens or didn't happen, but you know, to play devil's advocate, because you guys are both talking about how, like, well, he had to have fallen because of all these other things. The movie starts and then it flashes a few times with this like meteorite falling from the sky. And so you could also read it as, you know, this meteorite has bestowed these actual superpowers upon Riggin. And finally at the end, you know, he does have these superpowers that he's dreamed that he's had this whole time. Which, again, I don't necessarily care if that is what happened in reality or not, because it's also a movie. But I think thematically it works because, you know, this whole time Riggin's been like trying to show the world that he can do it, and no one really believes in him, but he believes in himself. And I think that's mirrored in the way that you know, he believes that he has superpowers, but obviously everyone in the world is acting as though he doesn't.
Yeah.
And at the end, he's able to, you know, take off, and finally, like Jared said, somebody's able to recognize the superpowers that he's believed that he's had all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. If he has them or if he doesn't, you know, I mean, and that's why they give you the meteor shot. I didn't even think of that, but it's just like, I think if he does or if he doesn't, it works either way, you know?
Yeah, I do like that kind of interpretation because, like, I did see, like, kind of like, you know, the literal scene of what was maybe happening or not, but, like, metaphorically, I think you guys are, like, spot on that when he jumps and his daughter looks up, I think it's, like, the time after his passing, like, many great artists, they're not appreciated until they're gone.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, yeah, so I didn't think that was a meteorite for some reason. It makes sense that it is. But since, like, I had never seen the movie, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't even look into, like, a synopsis.
Think it was Birdman?
Yeah, I thought it was like a bird, like a phoenix, or just a bird falling out of the sky. And in this case, Michael Keaton's, like, what he was, I guess you could say, a little legacy of who he was, or Riggin. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was just like a flash forward into the future of, like, a star has fallen. Okay. As in, like, a celebrity.
That's cool, too.
I like that.
So that was my interpretation from the beginning. And seeing how it played out in the end, I was like, so I'm guessing he died. And this is like what Spencer was saying, an appreciation, you know, realizing that, you know, something great has come to an end.
Yeah.
That's what I really like about this movie. It doesn't try to tell you one way or the other. It just gives you moments and immerses you and lets you explore themes throughout the movie. And especially with it being such a current day setting and having them talk about like real actors, like, oh no, what did they say? They're like talking about Robert Downey Jr. and like
Woody Harrelson, Jeremy Renner, Michael Fassbender.
He's doing the next Hunger Games. He's like, oh, he's doing the prequel to the X-Men prequel.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a really good narrative of like, what's the difference between a superstar and an actor, you know? And like, and obviously we might not relate to that as much being a consumer, but it was just a really insightful look into what can happen to a superstar and like what is art and what is art if you're trying to just make a name for yourself. Like how much are you losing yourself and just trying to show the world that you're great, or are you just trying to make great art? And I don't know. It's not something that, you know, you can relate to, but it is such a cool, you feel like you can. You feel like you can relate to Reagan and his problems and the theme throughout the movie. It's just really different. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, touching on that then, I kind of want to take the conversation in that direction. You're talking about like the themes that the movie's talking about and how we can relate to Reagan. And I think that Reagan is a very relatable character because of like these themes that he embodies. But what, I guess I want to ask you guys first then, what themes did you kind of pick out about the film?
So like the overall theme that I got from the movie personally was like it explores a lot of what is real, what is fake, and what matters. And I really kind of liked that a lot because throughout the entire movie, they're always talking about like, oh, it has to be real, it has to be truthful, it has to be genuine. Mm-hmm. And other stuff is like, you know, it's terrible if it's fake and it's not really art if it doesn't really captivate an audience because it's not real or relatable. And then also what matters, like, does any of it matter? Like, because it's all fake in the long run because it's not real life and you're not in those moments, in these scenes with these people that they're acting out. I don't know, I thought that was a big theme.
That was one that I noticed too. Like, yeah, the Mike played by Edward Norton, he's always talking about like, oh, I need it to feel real, which is why he wants to have sex on stage with, you know, during the performance.
Yeah.
And he also talks with some of the characters, especially Sam, Emma Stone's character, about how he can only be real when he's in character and he pretends everywhere else. Like, you know, the only time that he can perform sexually, let's say, is when he's on stage and he can't do it elsewhere because like his real self is on stage. Mm-hmm. And that actually kind of goes back to the Batman, like we were talking about, like Bruce Wayne, which is the real mask. Yeah. And I guess real quick, I thought it was kind of fitting. I didn't plan this at all, but in preparation for watching the Batman, I rewatched the first two Batman films, the ones directed by Tim Burton, and those star Michael Keaton. So I rewatched those, and then it just so happened that I guess by watching those, I also kind of prepared myself to watch Birdman with Michael Keaton, where it references the fact that he was in, you know, Batman movies before. Anyway, it wasn't planned at all, but it worked out great. But yeah, so Mike pretends everywhere else, and then when Sam is yelling at Reagan about how horrible of a father he's been, she says, "In the real world where it counts, you're a fraud." And so, yeah, I think that the film has a lot to do with like being real, like, and being fake, and being genuine, and like what those things mean in what contexts.
What are some other themes you guys picked up?
Something along the lines of like, if you're passionate about something, you love something, you'll take those around you as well, those who you love with you. Or in this case, when he played as Birdman, it was just, I don't know, he was just doing it for fame and, I don't know, just the money. But in reality, he was like cutting off all the bridges he had with everyone else. And that caused him to have a divorce. It caused him to have a distance relationship with his daughter that he wished he had had. And he realizes it when he's becoming an actor. You know, he actually wants to make a name for himself, not just for being Birdman as his legacy. But that was the connection I'm trying to make, or the theme. I just can't put it into the right wording.
I really like how we explore in the movie, they explore the idea of like, if you're washed up and you're only known for one thing, how are you going to get attention again? And are you doing this for the sake of art and for the sake of other people's success? You know, creating a production where, you know, it's one actress's first time ever being on Broadway. or are you doing this just so people look at you again? And I just love the idea of ignorance in this film. And oh man, I was trying to think of this word during the Batman. Being full of yourself. Like, what's another word for that? Like
egocentrism.
Yeah, the ego that you must have, and we see it in different forms of Mike's character and also Riggins. But what are you doing this for? For yourself or the people around you? And I feel like we are constantly given that theme as we see him contrast with his different relationships and like getting a chance to talk to his ex and, her saying like, for a second, I couldn't remember when we were divorced. And, Michael Keaton's character being so full of himself and so like, horse blinders to try to get his name back out there that he's just, just talking about fun facts and like can't realize why his wife would ever divorce him, or his relationship with his daughter just being his assistant and and it never becomes much more than that. And I just like that we're seeing a very ignorant man that is doing everything for himself and watching how that plays off. I think that was the most enjoyable theme for me throughout the movie. The alternate tower for the movie, the unexpected virtue of ignorance. I feel like that's very fitting through everything we watch in this movie.
Yeah, for me, that's also like the biggest theme. I guess if I were to boil it down to a couple words, I'd say that it's about like the search for like validation and like reputation and love. The characters talk. A lot of it's Riggin, but a lot of them talk about like wanting to feel loved, wanting to be respected and validated. Riggin talks about wanting to do something important. Naomi Watts' character, who's it's her first time on Broadway, says, "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I made it." So everyone in the film is looking for this validation and looking for love from other people. In the play that Riggin's adapting, his character asks, "Why do I always have to beg people to love me?" And that parallels Riggin himself, because the whole movie he's basically begging people to love him. Mm-hmm. He's begging, those around him personally, and then like the crowds and the critics. He's begging for that attention, and like the fear of being humiliated is a theme that's really personified in Edward Norton's Mike. He doesn't want to engage in anything with Sam because he's afraid of not being able to perform, and it's that humiliation that he's afraid of. And yeah, ultimately, like Jared was saying, like Riggin is self-absorbed at the expense of his ex-wife and daughter. Like he's so focused on getting this approval from everyone else that he's let his like personal relationships go by the wayside. Yeah, and you see that even with his new relationship with Andrea Riseborough's character. She's his new like muse or fling, and she has to pretend like she's pregnant in order to try to get him to like show her any affection, which ends up being a lie. And when he tells Naomi Watts' character that she's gonna be great, Andrea Riseborough's like, he's never told me that. So he keeps doing the same thing over and over again, and at the expense of other people. And then something that his wife says to him is, "You confuse love for admiration." So he's like looking for love, but every time people are trying to offer it to him, he rejects it because what he really wants is admiration. Yeah. And I think that you kind of see that in the scene where they're at the bar. Riggin and Mike are at the bar, and there's a critic at the corner. And they're talking about the critic and like, what the critic's opinion is going to be and how that's the only opinion that matters. And then you see this woman come in with her family, or like her husband and someone else. And like, she's a fan of Birdman. And so she goes up to Riggin and she's like, "Oh my gosh, like I want a picture. I love you so much." And she like tries to kiss him on the cheek. And Riggin is like kind of like disgusted by it. Like he does not want her attention, even though her attention is like supposedly what he wants. Yeah. He claims that he wants love from other people, but in the end, he only really cares about like what the critic is going to write and not about this person right in front of him that's like telling him like, "I'm so happy for like the character that you've played, and you mean a lot to me." But that doesn't matter to him.
Yeah, I want to talk real quick about like that kind of choice that he has to make between admiration and love. And I think like after I watched it like made so much more sense to me, the title, because it's Birdman, it's not Birdman : the unexpected virtue of ignorance. It's Birdman or the unexpected virtue of ignorance. And I think it's trying to demonstrate that choice he has, because in the end, there's a newspaper article about him and his performance titled The
Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance.
Exactly. And so he's choosing between love and admiration. People love him for Birdman, but people admire him for this play that he's doing. Mm-hmm. And I really, really liked that, because like going into the movie, I didn't know, like, okay, that's kind of a weird like way to name a movie. Like, why would you put an or in there? It's usually Birdman : blankety blank.
And it sounds kind of pretentious if you don't get the meaning of it.
Yeah, exactly. But I got it, and it was super cool. It was like portraying the choice that he's making.
Yeah. I think that choice really like comes to a head in the scene where Birdman does manifest himself physically, because that's where Birdman is really cracking down on, you know, you should just embrace why everyone loves you. And like it starts showing like this like
orchestral,
and like explosions, and the military shows up, and like he's flying around, and like he's talking to the camera about how like, oh, you like this, don't you? And like this giant like bird creature made of metal shows up on the building and is like, you know, screeching at the camera. And yeah, he has to decide whether he's going to take that easy way out. At least that's how he views it, and just embrace like the fact that people know him as Birdman and love him for that, or is he going to choose the path of admiration and reject that side, the Birdman side of him, and keep pursuing, you know, the attention that he's trying to now.
Yeah.
I really like the scene where he's at like his end with this play after going through all these troubles, and he just kind of has a one-on-one with his manager, which is Zach Galifianakis, and like, let's cancel this. I'm done. And Zach Galifianakis realizes what would motivate someone like Regan, and he's like, oh, like, we have a full house. The line goes 3 blocks. You know, the Saudi Arabian prince, you know, brought 3 of his daughters or wives and stuff. And
Martin Scorsese's in the audience.
Yeah. And, you know, he's casting a new movie. And I wasn't supposed to say that. Regan's like, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, let's do this. And then you have, like, some eavesdropping other people that are outside the room. You're like, is that real? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah, and the new pope. It's like, it's just sad that that's what it takes for him. But like, that's our character. He needs to be seen, and that's his motivation. That's what it takes for him. He wants everyone to recognize him again, and that's all it takes for him to just keep going. Yeah. I love that.
And then he has to make himself like vulnerable for that too, because like that's why I think his robe gets caught in the door, and he's like has to walk in like basically like naked except for his underwear, and like, you know, now not just on the inside but on the outside, Regan has to make himself completely vulnerable, and that's like the only way that he can get this like approval.
Yeah.
And then I also love, there's a line when Sam is yelling at Regan about like the fact that he's been a poor father, and she says, you know, your ego and self-obsession aren't worth anything. And I think that that's also like a good statement for like the theme of the movie, is that like he has this ego and he's obsessed with this play because of what it'll do for him. But, you know, in the grand scheme of like all of human history, and even just like, you know, the world that we're living in right now, like it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, he refuses to believe that.
I first time heard the soundtrack out of context because David had seen the movie before me when I lived with him and would play it. And I was just like, what is this? Like, it's just like improvised drumming. After seeing the movie, I love that soundtrack. It is just so cool. Mm-hmm. It works perfect for the movie.
I do like it too.
One thing I will mention also, I loved, my favorite shot in the film is when he's going into that liquor store. It just has all those like Christmas lights. And oh man, that was really pretty. I love that shot.
Mm-hmm. I think I've seen that shot in like a compilation of like beautiful shots of all cinema history, and that was when I was like, "What is that?" But now that I've seen it, I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Isn't there something similar in another movie that we've seen that's got like a bunch of those lights and those like chili pepper lights and stuff?
Not that I can think of.
I can't think of. I don't know. Felt really unique. Like I haven't seen that before.
Is that La La Land or something? Like, it's like two people are on a date, and there's like a bunch of lights like this.
Maybe like Midnight in Paris. I don't know.
I don't think Midnight in Paris, because I just watched that recently.
Okay. But yeah, that's a really nice shot. I guess one more thing is that I noticed a couple things with the sound design, and these are both like related. So don't remember which scene happens first exactly, but there's a scene. I think this one comes first. So it's when Riggin is talking to his wife, his ex-wife. And he's talking about how, like, this is my chance and I have to take this chance. And then during the scene and after she leaves, you can hear that in the background there's this like loud clock ticking. And obviously that's an intentional choice. I don't think they had like a clock on set, but I think it shows that, you know, time is running out. He feels the fact that he's old. He comments on how wrinkled and gross he looks. And, you know, he thinks that this is like his last chance. And so the clock ticking like reminds the audience of that. And then similar with the sound design, when Sam is yelling at Riggin after she's done blowing up at him, you can hear this like faint like heartbeat noise. And you can hear that it's like going fast. But then as Emma Stone's performance kind of calms down and she realizes that she's hurt her father, you hear like the heartbeat kind of slow back down again. And so it's kind of it shows in both the visuals in her performance and in the audio that things are like de-escalating, and it kind of calms down.
Cool. I didn't notice that. But yeah, this movie, I think it's right at 2 hours. It flies by for me. It is just, you're just watching moments. You're like, oh my gosh, what? It's over. But it's just quick, really great watch. I would highly recommend it to anybody listening to this.
Oh yeah, and I guess a little comment that I also like made earlier was like how you get so attached or so connected with the character after being with him so long. When the last performance before he ends up in the hospital, when he says to his ex, he's like, "I'll see you in the plane. You should go find your seat." And like he puts on the wig and he just pulls out this gun from like the top shelf. I'm like, I know that is not a prop. And he pulls out the magazine. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this guy. Oh goodness,
And he's ready for it to be over.
exactly. And I was like, I was scared because he starts playing the lines, but he starts improvising a bit more on stage, you know. And I'm like, please do not. And he even points it at this an actress. I'm like,
Yeah.
I was like literally at the edge of my seat watching this on my phone. And as soon as he pulls that trigger, everyone stands up, gives him the standing ovation that he wanted. But at what cost? You know?
It became a little too real. And,
Yeah.
it's also funny when Edward Norton's character is like, oh, and also, get a better gun. That thing, I could see the red cap. It's not dangerous to me. Like, I'm not scared when you point that at me. And so it's just funny that, like, he gets
He's
a real
like,
gun.
okay.
He's, like, waving it at him. I love that. And, yeah, I didn't even think about that, but just what it takes for things to be real for him
Yeah.
is to actually shoot himself and see the standing ovation that he gets, you know. And then you still see the critic leave and all this stuff, but, like, that's what it took for him shooting himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, both literal and figurative blood was
Right.
spilled. I think that's what she said in the report or critic. But yeah, I would give this movie a rating of a 9 to 10.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, the first time I watched it, I gave it a 10. I don't give it 10s a lot. But on rewatch, I'm dropping it to a 9, but I still love this movie. I think this movie is so good. So, yeah. Very solid 9 out of 10.
I think I'd also give it a 9 out of 10. Maybe 8.5 out of 10, but really good. Really up there.
Yeah, I would give this, first time I watched it, a 9 out of 10. And I wasn't sure if I'd like it just as much this time, but still amazing. Still a 9. Nothing went up or down for me. It was just a really good experience. All right, so that wraps up this week's recommendation. And I think next we have Spencer ready to recommend us a movie.
Yeah, so the movie I want to watch for this week, I think you guys have all seen, but I have not. So I want to watch a Studio Ghibli film, Spirited Away. I have not seen that.
Okay.
And I was kind of looking through Letterboxd, like to try to get my decision down. And it was in the category of life-changing movies. So some high expectations, but I'm really excited. I know people say that Studio Ghibli is amazing, and I'm really excited because I love animated movies too.
Okay, cool. So if you want to avoid spoilers for Spirited Away, go ahead and watch that before our next episode. These episodes come out every 2 weeks on Monday.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to this week's podcast.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, see you next time.
Bye.